Can I have your attention, please? We're about to begin. Good morning, everyone. My name is Liz Hughes, and I'm the CEO of NIDA, the National Institute of Dramatic Art. I have the honour of being your MC for today and to be with so many brilliant colleagues and students. A big welcome to everyone in this room, including our international delegates from 6 countries, our virtual delegates joining us online, hello, to the Federal Education Minister, Jason Clare, the Assistant Minister for International Education, Julian Hill, TEXA Commissioners, no, thank you. And it is wonderful to be joined by graphic recording artist Alice Eadie, over here, I believe. Alice will be capturing the conversation graphically. Before we begin this morning session, I need to share some housekeeping information with you. If you have any inquiries throughout the day, the registration desk is your first point of call. You would have come up to the registration desk as you came in. If you are injured or require medical attention, please speak with the staff at the registration desk. If in the unlikely event we are required to evacuate the venue, we ask that you follow all instructions from Sofitel staff. So today, there will be 4 sessions with breaks for morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea, and very importantly, a post-conference reception in Sophie's Lounge. We'll be using Slido today. So Slido is being used for all the Q&A. To post a question, scan the QR code that you see around the room or on session slides using your mobile device. The participant code is TEXA25. Then select the session title and then Q&A. For those who are joining us virtually, a link to Slido will be shared in the chat function. Note that all questions posted are visible via the app and the link to enable upvoting. So if you like one of the questions, please like it. So then we'll be able to work out which are the popular questions. You can choose to include your name with your question or remain anonymous. Note that all questions will be saved. Now, I'm delighted to introduce you to Perry Wandin, Wiradjuri Elder, to welcome us to country, and this will be followed by a performance from the Jalo Dance Group. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Good morning, everybody. Warmajanka. As you heard, my name's Perry Wandin, Wiradjuri Woiwurrung Elder. Standing here in my father's shoes, who I'm very proud to say was the first Aboriginal player to play for St Kilda in 1952-53. We got anyone at barracks for St Kilda besides me? Yeah, I like this crowd. Firstly, I must acknowledge all my ancestors, elders, both past, present and emerging, all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I live in Hillsville, and for those overseas people, it should be a good hour's drive out to the east. You'll see in the background there's a heap of mountains. Now, Corrandirk is in a place, as I said, Hillsville, and from 1863 to 1924, any Aboriginal person that come into Melbourne was taken up there and said, you live here now, this is where you're going to die, because they wanted all the Aboriginal people out of sight, out of mind. So from 35 men, women and children at the start, because you think about when colonisation happened, all the diseases were brought to Australia. And I know it hit Sydney and Melbourne, it hit us pretty bad, Wurundjeri people, because from thousands down to 35 men, women and children. Now, I was saying about my father was the last Narangita, meaning the head man. Now, that was passed down from Simon Wonga, who led everybody up there, then passed on to William Barrick in 1872-73. William Barrick held it for 1900 till 1903. He passed it on to my great-grandfather, Robert Wandoon. Today our family name's Wandin. So he held that for 5 years and died a young man of 53, but he had 10 children with Granny Jemima, and that's who we are, which we're going down the native title claim now with the 10 children. Sadly, there's only six of them left. 2 didn't have any children, and the other two families just passed away. And it's a story which has to be told. Genocide was going on at Corandurk Mission, and by the time 1924, everyone had sort of fell apart, and they were told they could leave. The rest of my great-grandfather's family were forcibly moved off the mission. 3 family groups stayed because they were married and they started families. The rest was walked by gun down to Lake Tyers, which is in the corner of Victoria, for those people overseas, if you get the map up. And they're still there. They've all moved around in Victoria, but today we're going, as I said, native title. But my father became our last Narangita because the corporation started in 85, and we've just been getting everything together. And my father, bang, there, and you got to pay homage to him because what he was able to do from taking over a role from being an VFL it was back then, to an AFL footballer, to lead that way for the next generation to come through. I myself went down, had a quick run with Footscray, under 19s, and I quickly went home. And because it was totally different for me. Country up there was country, and that was in 76. So you could imagine me coming over that Yarra River, which we used to think was a barrier for us, we're safe. Get over and come down to this big smoke and go, what is this? Because all we used to do is ride bikes. As soon as the lights went dull on the thing, you knew you had to be home, or you'd hear your mother screaming her lungs out 2 blocks away. But today we're very proud to be able to stand. I'm very proud to stand here because my father made a legacy for us to be able to follow, and the stories that we are able to. My mother was English too, Olive Potter. I had a grandfather called Harry Potter too, so yeah. You look at both sides, but I've been able to go through a journey of my own, being a cultural heritage officer, then becoming an Aboriginal heritage officer, meaning I can go out to any of these new sites they're building, and if they don't comply with any of the Act, I can shut that job down. But the old Jackie Dancer got a bit of me, so I just sit back now and talk to you lovely people and try to tell you the story of my family. So I hope with the Jarlo dancers, I'll be sitting, oh no, I want to take marks. I'm going to get up the back there and see what they're going to do, and because they won't know I'm looking at them. But welcome everybody. Womanjeka. Yemen Kunibik, Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, meaning welcome to the land of Wurundjeri people. And out of the 6 clans, we're the Willumbullock, the last of the 6 clans. And like I said, from probably 35 men, women and children, well, I think we might be around 1,500, 2,000 today. So please stay safe, and people from overseas, please take care and have a safe journey home. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Perry. It's a privilege to be here on beautiful Wurundjeri land. My name's Gunga Giri, proud Malakati man with ties into the Kulin Nations. The instrument I play is traditionally called a yidaki, not a didgeridoo. It's hollowed out naturally by termites. Back in the old days, we didn't have big long drills that you can find at Bunnings. So the termites gift us this instrument. This is more for you overseas guests. It's a gift of nature. So by playing the instrument, we can give back to country or give back to Mother Earth. So the vibration is that of healing. Today, however, the Jarlo Dance Group is all about celebration. So I welcome you all here. It's a privilege to be here. And I'm just going to start off and play a grounding piece to set an amazing scene and space for the day to come. You might want to take some deep breaths and shut your eyes if you're game. You might recognise some of the nature sounds. A connection to country might look like this or sound like this. If I hear a kookaburra in nature, I'll play the kookaburra back to the kookaburra. And if I get that sound right, the kookaburra will then sing back to me. So there's another little example of what a connection to country might be. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so this next song is all about creation, and we're going to be joined by Mr. Barramar himself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Woman Jack, everyone. My name is Barama Blow. Me and Ganga are the founding members of the Jala Dance Group. It's a word from my father's country, and it means fire. Fire is a strong, staunch element in Aboriginal culture. It unites us, it brings us together, but most importantly leaves impact. That dance I just did there, I just grounded to country. I want to acknowledge that we're on sacred land today, and we always dance and acknowledge the ground that we dance on before we perform that dance. Thank you to Uncle for his beautiful welcome wherever he is in the room, and also thank you for acknowledging all the St Kilda tragics as well, being one myself. So the first dance we're going to do for you guys here is the creation story. For those who don't know, the creative spirit in this area in the totem of the land is Bunjil, and he's the wedge-tailed eagle. He's a spirit that goes in the form of a wedge-tailed eagle. He's our creative spirit. And on Wurundjeri country, he created first kangaroo, which the Woiwurrung word is marum. He then creates emu, which the Woiwurrung word for that is barimul. And finally, he creates man, which is Kulin, and then we celebrate. So I'm going to do an interpretive piece of the creation story. being Bunjil and all the animals for you guys today. So this is the creation story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was incredible. Thank you very much to Perry and to the Jalo dancers. Give another round of applause, please. We very much appreciate the warm welcome to country from Perry. I too wholeheartedly acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country that we meet on today and pay respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples with us today. This year's theme is trust, transparency and transformation. Before we dive into the day, I want to reflect on how we can find transformative opportunities in a complex, disrupted environment. Rapid disruption is the new normal. Accenture's Global Disruption Index reports that levels of disruption increased by 200% from 2017 to 2022. In comparison, levels rose by only 4% in the previous period. Reflecting on the factors disrupting universities, the pace of change in generative AI and related technologies has increased dramatically. AI, and especially in the creative industries, is no longer on the horizon. We anticipate that its use will be in every stage of the artistic practice and is rapidly reshaping how stories are made and shared. This ubiquity makes it urgent, and we asked not just how to use AI, but why, with whom, and for what purpose. The question isn't really whether artists will use AI, but whether they'll shape it or be shaped by it. Our response must be to adapt our education and research to secure its essential relevance, retain human nuance, establish ethical frameworks to protect academic and cultural integrity, and make sure that our teaching and assessment tools and resources aligns technology with academic values and standards, while ensuring that our students and the quality of their teaching experience and learning experience sits firmly at the centre. Student and societal expectations of universities, as we all know, continue to change too, as we rise to the opportunity of implementing the ambitions of the Australian Universities Accord and increase participation in tertiary education. Some of us are under real financial strain and our business models are in flux. The global political situation shifts rapidly and climate change is an ongoing seismic disruptor. Higher education needs reinvention and to evolve continually. We need to find positivity and opportunity in the chaos. Some of the creative DNA we instil in our students at NIDA, I believe, is vital for the higher education sector as we embrace transformation. For example, NIDA's community have an entrepreneurial DNA, the ability to improvise courageously, imagine alternative universes, connect emotionally with people in any context, communicate ideas, navigate uncertainty, radically problem solve, and an unbridled determination to deliver an outcome known in the industry as getting the show on the road, no matter how big the obstacle. Secondly, within the DNA is the ability to collaborate. Through practice-based learning and delivering creative production, students across disciplines, staff and industry partners must collaborate to storytell, design new solutions and to imagine what is possible. Higher education providers are known for expanding imaginations and the possibilities for students. We need to use our creative toolkits and core skills to reimagine education to ensure that it remains industry relevant and our students are taught to think critically and can adapt for a future that is not yet known. During this conference, I encourage you to think about the following questions. As we lean into a highly disrupted environment, what are the game-changing opportunities and innovations the Australian higher education sector can embrace? How do we think big enough to extend our thinking to ensure we don't miss the most impactful opportunities whilst keeping the wheels on? Is complacency one of our biggest risks? And can complacency threaten the trust and reputation education often has as an enabling North Star? Should we be co-piloting with our stakeholders, the current and future students and staff and communities and others? Do we need to rethink the relationships between education and industry? NIDA has a healthy circular relationship with industry, which ensures the currency of our education. That is, we inform industry trends and are informed by them. Are there even more integrated, novel, or radical options we should explore? We need to be ambitious to evolve, reimagine, and sizably enhance our quality education so that it is future ready. We need to trust each other and leverage our collective effort to positively evolve. We need sound, responsible governance that enables and supports innovation and agility. I'm very much looking forward to the collaboration and big ideas from the brains trust of speakers and all of you today. In a moment, I will introduce you to our opening keynote speaker, Melinda Cilento, who will answer questions at the end. So can I just focus you on the Slido slide? Hopefully that will come up in a minute, because you can put your questions into Slido whilst Melinda is speaking. So the opening keynote, Steering the Future, Trust-Driven Governance and Transformative Productivity Through Higher Education. Melinda is the Chief Executive of the Committee for Economic Development of Australia, CEDA, a company director, economist and experienced senior executive. She is also the Deputy Chair of Australian Unity and a member of the Ministerial Advisory Council of Australian Unity, Council on Skilled Migration. She is a member of Amplify Australia Research Committee, a member of the ACCC Performance Consultative Committee, and a Melbourne Institute Advisory Board member. Melinda was previously a non-executive director with Woodside Petroleum, co-chair of Reconciliation Australia, a Commissioner for the Productivity Commission, Deputy CEO and Chief Economist with the Business Council of Australia, and held senior roles with Invesco, the Federal Department of Treasury, and the International Monetary Fund. Please join me in welcoming Melinda to the stage.
If you don't mind, I'll just get myself a little drink of water first. Well, Liz, thank you so much for that introduction. Can I also thank Uncle Perry for his warm welcome to country. It's always fantastic, isn't it, to start the day with a bit of yidaki and a bit of dance. Can I add my acknowledgement to the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and the Bunurong people of the East Kulin Nation and pay my respects. And I don't want to just do that and glide past it. I want to acknowledge their custodianship of this land that we're meeting on today, but also acknowledge the knowledge that they've built up over tens of thousands of years. You saw it in the dance today, you heard it in the Yidaki, and thank them for sharing that knowledge with all of us in the spirit of reconciliation. I am going to talk today, Liz set the scene. She used a whole bunch of words that I'm going to come back to, but trust is number one amongst those, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the work of the Expert Council on University Governance, which I chaired, and then hopefully draw some links for you from that to these tremendous issues of productivity, trust, uncertainty, all these things that we're grappling with, and all of which, how we respond to them, are fundamental to future prosperity for all Australians. Now, I'm multitasking today as well, and it's nowhere near as hard as playing a yidaki and clapsticks, but let's see how I go. The University Governance Council, Expert Council on University Governance, was established really against the backdrop of concerns and I think, quite frankly, mistrust in public universities in Australia. And there was a whole bunch to that, but I think largely there were concerns about how the universities were performing and the extent to which public universities were actually engaging with and listening to their critical stakeholders, and that included staff and students as well as the communities in which they operated. Why is it important? It's important because public universities really matter, and I'm going to come back to that. Who was the Expert Council on University Governance? There were three of us who were appointed by the government. That was myself, Sharon Burrow and Bruce Cowley. And then we did have a group of real experts from the AICD, the Australian Indigenous Governance Institute, the Governance Institute, the Law Council, TEXA, Universities Australia, the University Chancellors Council, and then tagged on the end there is the Honourable Robert French. Robert was wearing one hat, and he was making such a great contribution that when he was replaced, we decided to keep him on, and that was a good decision, can I just say that. We were established by education ministers in 2024 as a result of a recommendation that came from the Universities Accord interim report in 2023. And really our remit was to think about how we could strengthen the governance of universities. So there's a whole bunch of other things that you might think we were going to do. There's a whole bunch of other things that track to governance, but we were squarely focused on how could we strengthen governance within universities. And we were specifically tasked with developing a set of governance principles that would apply across all public universities in Australia. We didn't want to recreate the wheel. So, of course, our work took into consideration existing principles and other work that was already trying to sort of lean into this governance question. So the ASX Corporate Governance Council principles, and I guess one of the reasons maybe I was tapped was because for my sins I was actually involved in the formation of the original ASX Corporate Governance Council principles. And of course the University Chancellors Council had a voluntary code in existence, a number actually. And then we drew heavily on the experience of the other members of the council. I said I'd come back to public universities and why they matter. And quite honestly, as you would have heard from my CV, which I'm going to have to amend at some point because it's ridiculously long, I've got a day job. but I was pretty keen to be involved in this work precisely because public universities really matter. And I think most of us would agree, but let me just run through why I think they matter. I mean, of course, they're responsible for educating and transferring knowledge to many, many Australians and international students. Our public universities are really important creators of knowledge and insights and opportunity. They're builders of networks and connections. And if you talk to anyone who's done something excitingly entrepreneurial or innovative, you'll know that, and you'll know the importance of our public universities. They're places where we see robust consideration and debate of the ideas and issues that matter most to all of us and to our future. They're bastions of curiosity, something that we need a lot more of. And quite frankly, they're an important sector in our economy, and anyone who's been close to them understands that very well. For me, that means that as a society, we do and we should expect an awful lot of our public universities. And honestly, I think they should welcome that. I think they should welcome the high standards and expectations that we apply. Trust in our public universities is really important. It's important to their performance, and good governance is critical to both trust and performance. The focus of our work, let me just sort of talk through some of the things that we really paid a lot of attention to, particularly as we started our work. First of all, we talked a lot about the purpose of public universities. And I said that we were drawing on other references around good governance, which of course we should, because there's some important principles that should apply across all organisations. But public universities are not big listed companies. They have very different attributes, they have very different characteristics, and they have a very important public good dimension to everything that they do. We paid a lot of attention to the uniqueness of university governance. So it's not just about their public purpose, it's about what was unique about their governance requirements and intentions. And of course, let me be really specific here. Let's talk specifically to the unique governance structures that exist within universities. So a governing body, a university council or a senate, management of course, but also the really important part of academic boards and academic governance. And here, of course, is the tension, if you like, around making sure everything works well together, but recognising the importance of independence, which is critical to universities, and independence of thought. We paid a lot of attention to the differences across the sector, and we heard a lot about this. No two universities are the same. They have different stakeholders, they have different staff, they have different priorities and objectives. They sit within different communities. So we needed to pay attention to that. We thought a lot about the challenges and opportunities facing the sector. And we took a lot of time to talk to and listen to the very many stakeholders who were interested in our work, to understand their perspectives and to try to reflect their perspectives as much as we could, or to demonstrate that we had heard what they said. So let me quickly run you through what we heard. Firstly, what we heard from the sector itself. We heard an awful lot about the challenges of policy change and policy uncertainty, and I'm sure everyone in this room is going to be familiar with that and would love to talk to me about that. So we get it. We understood that. We heard a lot about the challenges of funding, the financial pressures, the challenges of funding changes, and the challenges that are presented by the funding models. We heard a lot about regulatory burden. We also heard a lot about we're already responding. Now, nothing to see here, perhaps. We're already on it. No need for you to do what you're doing. That's perhaps one interpretation. And we heard an awful lot about there's no one size fits all, and there's no silver bullet. So we heard that. And then we heard a bit of this too, that you're talking to us about issues that everyone's dealing with. It's not just our issue, it's a societal issue. You might want to reference back to my sometimes it's important to hold certain institutions to higher standards, particularly when you're attracting to your institution some of the most vulnerable people in our communities and societies. What did we hear from other stakeholders? This included staff and students in particular, but also others. We heard really clearly that the business of universities was trumping everything else, and that included, in their views, public purpose and the public good. We heard an awful lot about a lack of inclusion and genuine stakeholder engagement, and we heard that pretty consistently, and including from people who were involved in the governance themselves and involved in the governing bodies. We heard an awful lot about lack of transparency around priorities, around objectives, around decisions, around financials, around conversations in committees, and a lack of accountability for things that weren't going right. And quite frankly, we heard a lot about a lack of trust both ways and how that was felt. And I'm going to say a little bit more about some of this in the form of what surprised me. I have to say, what really surprised me was the staff and student feedback. And I know some have perhaps suggested that we exaggerated that or we read too much into it. But can I just say, when you're sitting in a call with over 20 people representing staff, and one of the staff members says quite a way into the conversation, wow, my experience is so much better than yours because I haven't been harassed, I haven't been bullied, I haven't been discriminated against, and I haven't been vilified, I think you get a sense of what we were hearing. Now, we took everything from all sides at face value, but I was really struck by that. I was struck by examples of students who desperately wanted to contribute to governance but were told that they couldn't speak on matters of students because there was a quote-unquote conflict of interest. The other thing that we heard interesting from staff and students was that as representatives, they felt that they could not genuinely represent all of the views of the staff and students on campus, and of course they could not. Of course they could not. But they felt that they were sort of boxed into that, and we heard a lot about not being able to consult because of confidentiality, and them feeling the burden of feeling like they were the sole source of input of those perspectives into governance at the university. And then, because I didn't quite know how to describe that, I put a little picture in. I heard so much of this. It's not happening here, it's happening over there. Not our problem, we've already responded to that, that. So no one was really taking accountability for the fact that it was happening there, on their watch. So that really, really surprised me. I'm just going to see where... I've got to say this out loud too. I missed this. I was stunned by the sector's lack of curiosity. I was stunned by the defensiveness with which the sector engaged with us. And what we were basically saying was, we're kind of on your side. We get that this is tough. We understand the changes. We understand that you have high expectations apply to you. But there was a real defensiveness, a real, why are you doing this work? We don't need this work. We've got this. What I was kind of hoping was that people would understand that we were bringing a principles-based approach to this, and that they would ask, gosh, I wonder how that might be happening in my organisation or at my university. How might that be happening? How might I not understood the perspectives of the students or the staff? And how could I engage more genuinely with what was going on in the campus to understand where there might be issues or problems? We spoke to the National Student Ombudsman, who said to us they were stunned by the issues that were having to be raised with them because they couldn't be dealt with at the university. Really minor stuff that students were not able to find the right door to knock on or the right responsiveness once that door opened. So I was really, really surprised by that. Where did we land? We really did try to hear what was on the minds of the sector as well as other stakeholders. We developed 8 principles. They are high-level principles. I'm not going to go through them because you can read them yourselves. We developed an approach which is an if not, why not approach. We heard that universities are different. We heard that it's going to take time, and we heard that different universities are at a different starting point. And so what their path to getting to improved governance is going to be different. So 8 high-level principles and an if not, why not approach. So if you can't adhere to what we've said for whatever reason that is legitimate, explain it and explain how you are going to achieve the outcome that we want, right? And how long it might take you. We sought really hard not to create additional institutional structures. We wanted to work with what was already there. And then we also included in our report a series of recommendations which are designed to give effect to the work that we've done, which again was to put TEXA in charge rather than create a new institution, to talk about what TEXA would need to get that right, recognising that they will need to build up their own expertise and resources. We talked about the sector itself, and here I'm going to say Universities Australia taking responsibility for best practice and uplifting best practice and sharing best practice and talking about it and talking about what's hard and talking about who's doing it well. The sector has to own this. And then we had a series of findings and commentary to sort of give you more sense of context for what we were trying to do. And I'll be honest and say, we wanted to try to write this report as directly and bluntly as we could. I know some people will disagree with the tone and disagree with some of the findings, but we are sharing with everyone what we heard and what we thought was important to share with all of you. Now, I've got a whole bunch of notes there in case you ask me tricky questions. What I hope happens now. I don't want the sector to look at this as a regulatory tick a box. I will share something that I shared with the Minister. I said to him, more regulation is not the answer to your problems or the challenges of the sector. More regulation isn't going to work if the sector doesn't want to change. It'll give you a bigger stick, and by the way, you've got a pretty big stick now anyway. So I don't think regulation is the answer. So please don't look at this as tick a box. I want the sector to look at this and start now. These are voluntary, well, not voluntary, they're going into TEXA, but they're general principles. You don't have to wait for someone to tell you what they mean for you. Read them, understand them, and think about how you can use them to lift your performance. And honestly, even if you're not a public university, have a look as well. Right? These are standards that can, and principles that can help everyone uplift their governance. Engage with the principles, understand them, understand their intention, engage with stakeholders and understand what their expectations are, and know that what I've said to stakeholders is these are a tool for you as well, right? You now have a framework that you can use to consistently structure your engagement around governance with the public university that you are involved with. Be clear about what your expectations are and use the principles to help you make your perspectives and expectations clearly understood. Develop credible strategies to respond and communicate those. And by credible, I don't mean just say we're going to be top of the pops tomorrow. Be honest about what the challenges are. We understand that universities have evolved in different ways. There are resourcing implications for what we're talking about in difficult circumstances. Be open and honest about those issues and talk to stakeholders about them. Pay attention to the issue of leadership and culture. When you read the report, you'll see that we led with this. We led with this. If you want an inclusive governing body, if you want an inclusive institution, that has to be a culture which is led from the top. Now, I've been really intrigued to have a look at some of the LinkedIn comments around regulating culture. I don't think you can regulate culture, right? But you can lead with culture. You can set the example. If you're a chancellor or a vice-chancellor, that's a really important responsibility for you. What is the culture of your institution and how are you conveying that, communicating that, role modelling that, and how are you expecting everyone in your institution to do the same? having a diverse governing body and saying that that is inclusion is the furthest thing from the truth. The culture of that governing body and the demonstration that you make around how you engage with all of your stakeholders is critical. I can't say enough about that, but I'll stop now. And then share experience and knowledge. Like, this is not an easy thing to do, but talking about it, sharing best practice, sharing what you found hard, sharing what you thought made a difference, and lifting all boats together is in everyone's interests. And so I really would encourage the sector to do that. Because I think I'm supposed to talk about productivity because I do work at the Committee for Economic Development of Australia, I'll come back to that now. We are all about a strong economy and a strong social compact, and I think that's critical to this country. A strong economy for the sake of it, without it translating to benefits for every Australian, doesn't make sense to me. So one without the other doesn't make sense. Universities sit right at the heart of this. They are fundamental to the social compact of this country. They are fundamental to the social fabric of this country, to the debate and the ideas and the tough stuff that we really need to lean into more now than ever. Better governance helps universities function, right? Universities are full of people working there and studying there. Good governance helps them to do a better job, helps them to study, helps them to engage. Like, that is the core of the university, right? Now, Liz talked about uncertainty and ambiguity, that sort of catch acronym, the VUCA world. That's the world we're living in. I heard a lot of people tell me that with so much change, it's really hard to have good governance, to which I said, if you have good governance, it's really hard to manage change. It's really easy to manage change. It's easier to manage change if you have good governance. Number one, because you see it coming down the pike. I think I had a comment here and I didn't say it out loud, but I was really surprised by the number of people I said to at universities, did you have international student revenue on your risk register? How are you managing that? It's really hard to manage that well if you don't even identify it as a risk, and that's all about good governance. And quite frankly, good governance supports sustainably better performance in every organisation, and in universities that means that we're building the skills for social and economic contribution and participation. It means we're creating the knowledge and the insights and the innovation that we so desperately need to tackle all of the challenges before us. And we're strengthening the constructive discourse that is going to bring people together rather than fling them to the edges of our social dialogue. All of these things are fundamental to our future, and the work that we did and the Expert Council in setting up a set of principles that I think everyone in the sector can work with to uplift governance, I think has been really important. It's been pretty challenging, but hopefully it will lead to the sorts of change that all of us in the room expect and that the broader community is really looking forward to. And then my final slide says something like, thanks for listening and happy to take some questions.
That was an incredible presentation. Quite a few things to think about. And we have a number of questions. Please make sure that you add your questions. I suppose the first question, just taking a couple of these questions into one. So you saw a lot of things that you would have, that you were disappointed by, that you would like improvement, you want more curiosity, there needs cultural change, leadership. Was there an example of where this has been done well?
We definitely, I've got my lapel mic so I can hang out over here. We definitely saw examples of things that we thought were being done well, and we had people who were engaging with us really constructively. So I'm giving you the overall sentiment of what we had. The thing that, if I'm really honest, I'm going to call this out. The thing that struck me is when we had people together, the defensiveness is what rose to the top. And then individuals would come and circle back to us later and talk about the things that they were doing. So there are good things that are happening. The challenge for us is in the time frame that we had, we couldn't go and kick the tyres and sort of ask other stakeholders, well, these people have said this, what do you think? But there are definitely people who were, as examples, chancellors who were genuinely mentoring student representatives on their governing bodies who are genuinely trying to find ways to help them to be really constructive, recognising that they didn't have the skills and experience of many of the others on the governing body. So how could you extract what was really important and give them the confidence and the voice to be able to do that? So there were examples, but what we need, and this is why I called out Universities Australia, it's really, I think, incumbent upon them to sort of be highlighting what they and their peers think is working. Right? And share that information, put it out there transparently and put it out there for people to kind of challenge, right? So yes, there's good things happening, but unfortunately it felt like that defensiveness rose to the top.
So there's a question here about what were the recommendations to improve the voice of students and staff in university governance and foster genuine engagement?
So number one goes to leadership. So if you've got, and it's the same as any board, if you put one voice on a board or a governing body and say, there we go, tick, we've got diversity, there's nowhere near the truth. So one, you've got to think about what's the culture of the governing body, how do you make sure that they feel that their voice is being not only included but genuinely heard, and that it's actually sought after. It's not something that's dismissive. You're not sort of saying, oh yeah, here we go, they've said their thing and tick and that's done. So it's what's the inclusive culture at the governing body, and that includes, by the way, when you break for tea, whether you talk to people, whether you include them in your conversations or whether you're sort of excluding them. But the other thing is that, as I said in my comments, we heard so often from staff and students they were super proud of being involved, but they felt the burden of not being able to reflect everyone. So the governing body and the Chancellor and the Vice-Chancellor, they've got to go out and engage more, right? They've got to actually be understanding what people are saying around the campus, and that's through formal mechanisms like surveys, but also informally engaging. And if you're on a corporate board, you know that you go and do site visits, and what we heard was that the universities, the students and staff want to see more of the people from the governing bodies in and around the university, and not just on the days when you're handing out degrees. It's there in the tough times and having the tougher conversations and actually just sitting there and seeing what's really going on.
And there's a big opportunity, obviously, in engaging with those voices because we need the brain's trust to come up, really, don't we? Yep. So there's a couple of questions here. I mean, obviously, the sector in higher education is very diverse. There are the universities, there's also university colleges, so there's other higher education providers. So the question is, how do smaller higher education providers help shape and impact the conversation?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think, as I said in my comments, I want everyone to kind of have a look at the principles and read the report and see what in that sort of resonates, and think about what you think you're doing well and what you're not. Sometimes the smaller organisations can be more agile, can try different things and can actually go out there and say, this is something we tested that you might find difficult, but here's how we did it, and actually showcase what you think the benefits are. So, I mean, I think, you know, honestly, some big universities, you could kind of say they're too big to change. I think that's the challenge. So how do you figure out how to drive change in these big institutions? Smaller institutions can kind of lead the way and show where the innovation exists.
Fantastic. There was a question that I believe I'm a bit curious about too. Who was the least curious? Management? Where was it? Or the other way of saying it, who was most curious and who was least curious?
Who was most curious? Well, we were the most curious. We were keen to lift the lid. I think the best way to answer this is, in some ways, the people who were least curious either were the ones who were confident that they didn't need to change, and you could see that in lots of places, or some who felt that they weren't empowered to drive change. And that relationship between the Chancellor and the Vice-Chancellor is an interesting one. And there were occasions where you kind of had a sense where Chancellors perhaps didn't feel like they were really driving the bus. One of the things we debated a lot in this interesting tripartite arrangement at universities is what is the right structure, and ultimately you have to have a single body that is responsible for and accountable for performance. So if you've got the governing body go, well, that's the academic board, and the academic board's going, that's the governing body, and someone's going, well, that's management. And so I'm sorry to say, and I'll look at a Chancellor in the room, buck stops with you guys. You're the chair of the board. You know, I think the leadership has to be there. And that's where it is. And you've got to, if you've got people who aren't curious, it's your job to lift the lid on that.
So if you were starting from scratch, say we didn't have higher education yet, we were building from scratch, and you were thinking, how am I going to build an education sector where curiosity is paramount? Where would you start?
Oh, I'm going to say the minister's coming up next. It's almost too big a question, really. I mean, I don't want to fob it off and sound flippant, but it is just this point about curiosity is cultural. It's how do you, like asking questions, asking the tough questions. I think sometimes we sort of shy away from that, and we think we're being disrespectful, or we just have to sort of create a culture where we're challenging more, and we're asking the questions, and we're finding a way to have those conversations respectfully and constructively. And disagreeing or asking the question is not being disrespectful. It's not being troublesome or a troublemaker. You've got to be clear about what the outcome is you want, but I just think we've got to do a bit more of that. And it's tough at the moment because it's very easy for people from the sidelines to sort of be pretty nasty, to be honest. But for all of us, and particularly for an institution like universities, really thinking about what your purpose is, really thinking about what your values are, and calling that out, that's what leadership is. And that's what we just have to encourage people to do more of. And for all of us in the room, that means actually perhaps holding fire when someone says something we don't agree with. Right? The easy thing is to just have those cheap shots. I think that's really a responsibility for all of us to think about. Curiosity is really valuable. Not all countries and cultures enable it, and we should. And our universities are the institutions at the forefront of that, and we should be challenging them to do more of that.
And we've had a great history of doing that too, and invention. And when you travel overseas, you often find there's an Australian doing something really incredible and innovative.
Can I just, I'm sorry to go on a little bit of a side comment here, but when Uncle Perry was talking about his grandfather playing footy for St Kilda, I have to say the thing that crossed my mind was, man, how resilient. Doesn't that sound fun, go and kick the footy for St Kilda? If you've followed any of Tony Armstrong's work or any of the racism and sports stuff, that was not an easy gig. And he was passionate about that, and he would have been enormously resilient. And so I think there's a bit of the resilience piece that we all need to think about and try to be more resilient and perhaps a little bit less fragile in the face of challenge on issues that really matter to us.
Fantastic. That's a fantastic presentation. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. That was amazing. Thank you very much, Melinda. So I'm now delighted. We've mentioned the Minister has arrived. He's here, which is exciting. He's going to tell us all about curiosity, I believe. So I'm delighted to now welcome the Minister for Education, Jason Clare, to provide his welcome address. It's wonderful to have a minister here who is very engaged and passionate about the transformative impact of quality education. This is now the fourth time Minister Clare has spoken at the TEXA conference, which I believe is an attendance record for a sitting minister at the TEXA conference, and is a testament to his commitment. Please join me in welcoming the Honourable Jason Clare MP, Minister for Education, to the stage. Thank you.
Crikey, I thought it was third, but it's four. Time flies. Quickly and importantly, I just wanted to say thank you to Melinda for everything that you've done for us collectively. I think if you didn't know it before, you can see how fortunate we are to have Melinda Cilento lead the team that did that important piece of work for all of us to make us all better. You asked me how curious am I? I'm curious to know how we can keep you and harness all of that, not just temporarily, but for the long term. G'day. And is it too early to say Merry Christmas? We put the tree up at my house. Maybe that's because I've got a 4-year-old and he insisted on the weekend. But Merry Christmas, everybody. The year's quickly coming to an end. Can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today and pay my respects to elders past and present. And I want to start also by thanking Texa for the invitation to speak with you again today. My note said third time. Seems like it's the fourth time. And I want to thank Professor Mary Russell and Professor Kerry Lee Krause and all the commissioners and the whole team at Texa for everything that you do. And I also want to thank everybody here for all of the work that you do in our universities, but also in all of our private higher education providers as well. Because you're part of something very special. You've chosen to be part of something very special. Our education system, what I think, and I hope you know, is the most powerful cause for good. You know that because you see it in action every single day. What happens inside the places where you work has a massive impact outside of it. The teaching and the training that you do, it changes lives. The world-leading research that you do, it reimagines and it remakes the world that we're going to live in, the world that our kids will inherit. A good education system changes lives, but a good education system does more than that. It changes countries, and it's changed ours. But as you've heard me say before, and you'll hear me say a lot more in the future, whilst we've got a good education system, I think it can be better. And I think it can be a lot fairer. And that's not just about who gets through the door, it's about what happens inside. We've got great universities, great higher education institutions in this country. I know it and I see it every day. And for the most part, they're run well, but it doesn't mean that everything's perfect. And you know that. There's plenty of evidence for that. And where something isn't working the way that it should, we need to fix it. And that is not just the job of Texa. It's all of our job. Just one example of that is what I spoke about here last year, about sexual violence on campus. And I'm not going to run through the terrible statistics, you know them. But when I was here last year, the Student Ombudsman Bill was still in the Parliament. Now it's a reality. Sarah Bendel leads a team that's based right here in Melbourne, and they're doing some important work. I think they got their first complaint 15 minutes after they opened the door. I don't know why it took 15 minutes, but 15 minutes. They've now had 2,400. Now that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. The feedback that I'm getting from Sarah and her team, but also from people in this room, is that the work that they're doing is working. It's helping to resolve complaints of students and improve the way that universities and other higher education institutions are working. And in about 6 weeks' time, the next part of the puzzle will fall into place. On the 1st of January, the Code to Prevent and Respond to Gender-Based Violence comes into force. And that'll give the Ombudsman's recommendations real teeth. It'll hold all providers to the sort of standards that students and staff, and I think the whole community, expect of all of us. But it's not the only place where reform is needed, and you've just heard very eloquently from Melinda about the work that she has done for all of us. A couple of weeks ago, I released the report of the Expert Council on University Governance. And as you know, you've heard it again today, it is a serious report and it makes for hard reading. It says that we've got a lot of work to do to improve culture and leadership. It sets out 8 principles that it expects all universities to sign up to and to implement. And they cover everything from accountability and transparency to remuneration. And as recommended, we will put them into law. They'll be written into regulations through the threshold standards, and universities will be required to report annually to Texa on an if not, why not basis. And that will all start next year. As I said at the AFR Higher Education Conference a couple of months ago, this is not about attacking universities, it's not about belting universities or anyone else. I hope you know by now that I'm not interested in that. That is not my style. This is about making the organisations that you run and work in better, building trust inside your organisations and building public support for the work that you do. And that's why I think that getting the Remuneration Tribunal to help set salaries for Vice-Chancellors makes sense, and why we're going to do that too. It's also about time that we look at the powers and the tools that TEXA has and how they work or how they don't work at the moment. And I'm indebted to Professor Russell here for the work that you have done. We haven't really looked at this since TEXA was created almost 15 years ago. And a lot's changed since then. Mary wrote to me earlier this year and she recommended that we look at this, and I agreed. And I think that there is a good argument that TEXA needs better tools and stronger powers to be able to step in and act when it's justified in the public interest. And also to be able to respond to systemic risks, not just the compliance of individual providers. And that's what the consultation that my department led over the last few months has been all about. And the feedback that we've got hasn't been that surprising. A lot of organisations in this room said that TEXA doesn't need more powers. And a lot of ones outside this room said they do. I'll have more to say about that in the next few months. One more thing on governance. In a few weeks, I'll receive a report from the Race Discrimination Commissioner on racism in our universities. Anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, but not just that, racism in all of its repugnant forms. Now, let's not kid ourselves. We have challenges that we need to confront here as well, for staff and for students, for Australian students and for international students. Just like the work that former Sex Discrimination Commissioner Kate Jenkins did on sexual violence in our universities, I expect that this will make difficult reading. They have surveyed now more than 76,000 students and staff, and out of it, you can expect to hear some pretty awful things. And it's going to take some courage and some honesty from all of us to tackle this. All of this work has its roots in the Accord. The Ombudsman, the Code, the Expert Council, its report, the reforms that will come of it, the work that is happening right now on the powers that TEXA should have, the work on racism, all of that was called out or called for by Professor Mary O'Kane and the team who put together the university's Accord. But the Accord isn't just about that. It's a blueprint for everything that we need to do to set up the whole system for the next decade and the one after that. And what it says in really basic terms is that in the years ahead, more jobs will require more and more skills. It says that 60% of the people in our workforce today have a certificate, a diploma or a degree, and that over the next few decades, that will need to jump to about 80%. And that's a big jump from 3 in 5 people in the workforce to 4 in 5 people in the workforce with a certificate, a diploma or a degree. It means more people in the system. It means more people at TAFE. It means more people at university. It means more people in the private education providers that we see in this room today. More people in the places where you work. And that means that the work that you do will become even more important because it will affect more people. And it also means change, making sure that the system is ready for the changes that are going to come at us. And that includes what we teach and the way we teach it. AI, I think, is a good example of that because it won't just require us to rethink how we assess students. If it's going to be as ubiquitous and transformative as we think it will be, as we know it will be, then teaching students how to use it needs to be embedded in almost every course. I also think we're going to need a greater focus on teaching generally. It worries me that some of our highest ranked institutions have some of the lowest student satisfaction results. It's almost like there is an inverse relationship between international rankings and quilt results. Well, that got a response. Now, if we're going to build a bigger system where more people want to go, then we need to fix that. And if we need to help more people, young and old, to get a degree, then we also need to make sure that they've got the skills they need to start a degree. The Accord recommends that we massively increase funding for the bridging courses or the enabling courses that a lot of institutions offer that get you ready to start a university degree. And that's what we're doing, an extra $1 billion over the next 10 years. Next year, that will mean an extra 1,500 people will be able to do one of these courses, and more again the year after that, and after that, and after that, and they're free. And if there are going to be more people at university, we also need to fund more places so they can come. And that's what we're doing too. More Australians will start a university degree next year than ever before. Over the past few months, the interim ATEC, led by Mary O'Kane, has helped to allocate an additional 9,500 commencing places for next year right across the system. And the year after that, in 2027, it will be even more, an extra 16,000 places. Over the next decade, it means an extra 200,000 places. The Accord tells us that opening the doors of our universities wider means making sure that more people from poor families, from our outer suburbs, and from the regions and the bush get in the door, but also get through university. And that's what the changes that we're about to make to the funding system are all about. A real needs-based funding system for the first time to provide more support for students who need it, and that starts in January, and a new demand-driven system for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, what the Accord calls demand-driven equity. If you're from a poor family and you get the marks, then you get a place. And that starts in just over a year. These are the two big equity engines of the Accord. Demand-driven equity is all about prizing those doors open to more people from disadvantaged backgrounds, and needs-based funding is about making sure that they get the wraparound support that they need to get through, to complete their degree. But those two things on their own are not enough. They're not the only things that we need to do. The way that a course is structured can also make a difference. And I want to give you the example today of what's happening at Southern Cross University. Over the last few years, they've moved to a 6-week block model where you study 1 or 2 units at a time across 4 terms. Now, what do you think the results of that have been? I talked about student satisfaction rates a moment ago. Satisfaction rates are up, but not just that, dropout rates are down massively. They've almost cut them in half, from 35% 5 years ago to 19% today. Now, they're not just numbers. Think about the number of individuals whose lives are changed by completing a course that they otherwise would not have. Victoria University's been doing something like this for even longer, and the results are similar. What they call their progression rate has jumped from 75% to 91%. You know, that is real change, making a real difference for real people. I also think that there's more that we can do to make it easier to earn and to learn at the same time, to improve what we do today in work-integrated learning. And I think that there is a lot that we can do to make it easier to get the qualifications that you want, the qualifications that you need, quicker and cheaper. And part of that is breaking down that artificial barrier that we've built up between the vocational education system and the higher education system, cracking the code of credit transfer and recognition of prior learning. And there's good examples of that happening right now. I know that the University of Canberra is not the only one doing this by a long shot, but what they've announced in the last couple of weeks, I think, is a good example of what we need to see more of. They announced that they would take a year off a whole bunch of degrees if you've completed a diploma in the same area. And that includes nursing, early education, graphic design, and accounting. Now that saves you time, it saves you a year off your degree, but not just that, it saves you money as well, and lots of it. They think that over the next few years, this could save thousands of people on average about $6,000 off the cost of their degree, and that's not counting that extra year in the workforce that you get by completing your degree earlier. If you've done a diploma in accounting, and next year you start a degree in accounting at the University of Canberra, it'll save you up to $12,000. I want to see more examples like that. Making it easier for people to get the skills and the qualifications that they want and that they need quicker and cheaper. A more joined up system. And the interim ATEC has already started work on this. Next week, something else will happen that's important for the whole sector. Next week, I'll introduce legislation to formally create the Australian Tertiary Education Commission, the ATEC. Of all the recommendations in the Accord, this might be the most important. As someone told me the other day, the ATEC is the Accord. And I see that person in the audience right now. The Accord is big, and it's going to take more than one minister and more than one government to make it real. It's a national project, and it needs a steward that's going to be there for the long haul. The Accord made it very clear that this is what is needed, an ATEC to help improve policy, administration and coordination right across the sector. And that if we build it right, if it becomes a body that does have bipartisan support, the ATEC has the potential to do that, to help to drive real and long-lasting reform, to turn the higher education sector into a system, to open that door of opportunity that education is all about, and to help us to break down those barriers that still exist and that we've built up between the vocational education system and the higher education system. It will have 3 commissioners, including a Chief Commissioner and a First Nations Commissioner. It will craft mission-based compacts with individual universities, setting out the number of domestic and international students that they will teach. It'll provide advice, recommendations and reports to federal and state and territory ministers in relation to the higher education system and, more broadly, the tertiary education system. It'll take over responsibility for the higher education standards framework from the current higher education standards panel and provide advice on that to TEXA and to myself. It'll undertake and coordinate its own research and data analysis, and it will be required to prepare and publish a State of the Tertiary Education System report every year. In performing these functions and exercising these powers, the ATEC will also be required to have regard to what's called the National Tertiary Education Objective. And this was the very first recommendation of the Accord, that we put in place an objective, not just for the higher education system or the vocational education system, but for both. And that at its core, the objective of these two systems combined should be to underpin a strong, equitable and resilient democracy and help to drive national economic and social development and environmental sustainability. And the ATEC will also have to have regard to another objective that I think is fundamental, and that is to improve the outcomes for Australians who still face systemic barriers to education. Indigenous Australians, Australians with a disability, Australians from poor families, and Australians living in our regions and the bush. That's what the Accord is about, and that's what the ATEC will be about. I want to thank the Independent Advisory Committee who've helped to shape the bill that I'll introduce next week. I also want to thank the states and territories that we've consulted with. They've been a critical part of this. But I also want to thank you. There are a number of people in this room who've been part of the work that we've done over the last few months to get the bill to this point where it's ready to be introduced. And in many ways, this is just the start. I imagine that the scope and the role of ATEC will change over time to meet the different challenges that we're going to face. There are some people who say that university is overrated. They're wrong. Just look at the people that are coming through your doors today in record numbers. They are proof of the value that you provide. There are some people who say that universities are friendless and that everybody hates them. That's not right either. And there are some people who say that everything that I'm trying to do to open the doors of our universities wider has zero chance of success, and that presumably I shouldn't even try. To that I say that countries aren't changed by people who say that it's just too hard. They're changed by people who turn up, and they're changed by people who try, and they're changed by people who are willing to work together. That's what I'm about. That is what I have always been about. And I know it is what drives you too. And that's good, because there's a lot to do. And we're just getting started. Thanks very much.
Well, that was fantastic. Amazing to hear from a minister who's so engaged in education and to hear about that roadmap and the plans. We now are about to have a short break for morning tea. We've got a fantastic community in the room of amazing colleagues. We've heard some fantastic presentations already this morning. I encourage you during the break, this conference also is about connecting with one another so we can work collectively, to try and meet at least one person you don't know and to talk about what you took away from this morning's session. If you can please return for the next session, it will start promptly at 10:45. Thank you.